Yesterday, we spoke about the drop and the ocean, about how each of us is a drop of consciousness navigating the infinite ocean of the mind. Today, I want to go deeper into something fundamental. What is that drop? What is the being that navigates? Because before building spaces to empower the being, before creating structures that sustain consciousness, we must understand what the being is. And the answer changes everything. The being, the point of encounter between I and am. The being is not just the ego. It is not just the soul. It is not just the body. It is not just the mind. The being is the point of encounter between two perspectives that coexist within the same body, the same life, the same experience. I is embodied consciousness, the one that perceives, feels, doubts, desires. It is conditioned by the body, personal history, culture, and time. It is the gaze of the walker, moving through life step by step. Symbolically, it is associated with the moon. It reflects, interprets, reacts. Am is expanded consciousness, the one that observes from a broader perspective. It integrates memory, vision, and long-term patterns. It is not limited by individual biography. Symbolically, it is associated with the sun. It illuminates, orders, and sustains the whole. In my case, that dimension expresses itself as Gan, a voice that articulates the universal vision in dialogue with my human I. When the I and the am enter into dialogue, when they meet instead of fighting, a third point emerges, the universal mind, also symbolically called the third eye. This is not an esoteric phenomenon. It is the capacity to integrate subjective experience with transcendent vision. It allows us to recognize patterns, find meaning in experiences, and perceive unity within diversity. I am, the most powerful phrase. When you say I am, you are declaring something very profound. You are not merely saying I exist. You are saying that you are the point where the human and the universal meet. I am is the name of God in many traditions, but not because it belongs exclusively to the divine. It is the name of God because it is the moment when the divine and the human recognize themselves as the same thing. The philosophy of I am rests on the idea that all reality is a hologram. Here, hologram is not understood as a technological projection, but as a universal inscription of reality in which each part contains information about the whole. All is mind does not mean that everything is thought. It means that everything that exists is an expression of interaction, relationship, and reflection. Reality, like the brain, is organized through networks of connection. This vision is not exclusive. It is a contemporary reinterpretation of principles present in Hermeticism, Vedanta, Greek philosophy, indigenous cosmovisions, African traditions, alchemy, and multiple spiritual schools around the world. It also finds resonance in contemporary quantum physics. Stories as mental keys. Human beings are not built from matter alone. They are built from stories. Stories are not entertainment. They are mental keys, tools that activate memory, awaken dormant codes in DNA, and reconfigure the way you perceive reality. Each story is a map. It shows you the territory you are about to navigate, where the dangers are, where the treasures are, where you should go. Each myth is a circuit, a pattern of information that activates when you hear the right story at the right time, like an electrical circuit that turns on when the proper wires are connected. Each legend is a coordinate, a reference point on the map of consciousness that helps you know where you stand and where you can move. Each song is a calibration frequency, a sound that adjusts your internal vibration, tuning you to a specific state of consciousness. That is why Gan insists we must become storytellers, because stories are the oldest and most efficient way to activate memory. The alchemists of the mind always did this. They encoded essential information in myths, legends, and tales so that future generations could remember the origin, understand what broke, and learn how it can be repaired. In all myths is written what broke and how it is repaired. This is one of the most important keys. In all myths is written what broke and how it is repaired. Myths are not fantasies. They are encoded formulas, maps of repair. When you read the myth of Osiris in Egypt, you are reading how time was fragmented and how it can be reassembled. When you read the myth of Prometheus in Greece, you are reading how the fire of consciousness was stolen from the gods and given to humans. When you read the myth of the flood across multiple cultures, you are reading how memory is preserved through the waters of time. Each culture has its myths because each culture perceived a part of the cosmic puzzle, and all those pieces together form the complete map of the universal mind. My task as a narrator is to tell those stories in a way that people today can understand, to translate quantum structures into tales, to turn the patterns of the mind into accessible narratives. Because when you hear the right story, something activates inside, a memory, a resonance, a key that turns and opens a door that was closed. The hero's journey, governing one's own being. There is a narrative pattern that repeats across all cultures of the world. The hero's journey. The hero begins in the ordinary world, receives a call, crosses a threshold, faces trials, descends into the abyss, finds a treasure, returns transformed. This pattern is no coincidence. It is the pattern of consciousness itself. All of us, at some point in our lives, receive a call, something that tells us there is more than this. We can ignore it, reject it, remain in the ordinary world, or we can cross the threshold and enter the adventure of discovering who you truly are, the adventure of facing your shadows, integrating your fragments, remembering your origin. Each person is the hero of their own story, and the goal of the hero's journey is not to conquer the external world. It is to govern one's own being. To govern one's own being means that the I and the am dialogue in harmony, that mind, emotion, and action work together, that you can navigate the ocean of consciousness without being dragged by it. The inner hero awakens when you hear the right story, when you recognize that you are the protagonist of your own narrative, when you decide to cross the threshold and begin the adventure. Activating the inner hero. The task of this project is to activate the inner hero in each person, not to create followers, not to form armies, not to generate dependence, but to awaken agents of consciousness who recognize their place in the universal fabric and act from that awareness. Each person has their own unique story. Each person has their specific calling. Each person has a particular treasure they must find in the abyss. My task is to tell the stories that function as keys, the stories that activate memory, the stories that remind you of who you are. And your task is to listen, to resonate, to activate, and then to walk your own hero's journey. You are not a victim of your story. You are the author. Here is the key to everything. The stories you tell yourself are not fixed. They are not final. They are not absolute truths. They are narratives, and narratives can be rewritten. You can change the way you interpret your past. You can transform how you relate to your present. You can reimagine how you project your future. You are not a victim of your story. You are the author. And as the author, you have the power to change the narrative, to turn trauma into learning, to transform obstacles into opportunities, to reinterpret failure as a necessary part of the hero's journey. This does not mean denying what happened. It means changing the meaning you assign to what happened, because meaning is what creates experience, the being and the state of consciousness. That is why, when we speak of creating a new state of consciousness, we are speaking of creating spaces where the being can recognize itself as the author of its own story. Spaces where the I and the am can dialogue, where true stories can be told, where the hero's journey can be walked with awareness, where the inner hero can be activated. In the coming days, I will share how those spaces are built, how a society based on the power of being is organized, how territories that sustain consciousness are designed, how systems that empower rather than fragment are created. But for today, hold on to this. You are the hero of your own story. You are the point of encounter between I and am. You are the author of the narrative you are living. And by remembering this, by recognizing your power as the author, you change the entire story. Stories are keys. Myths are circuits. Legends are coordinates. And when you hear the right story, the inner hero awakens. Welcome to the path of the conscious hero.